Most people imagine heart disease as something obvious. They picture arteries slowly clogging with cholesterol until the vessel becomes completely blocked. In that picture, the danger is easy to see. The artery gets narrower and narrower until blood can no longer pass through. Eventually, the heart muscle is starved of oxygen, and a heart attack occurs. But this common explanation hides a much more complicated and more surprising reality. In many cases, the artery responsible for a heart attack was never severely blocked at all. Some arteries that cause heart attacks appear only moderately narrowed when doctors examine them before the event. That raises an important question. If the artery was not completely clogged, what actually caused the heart attack? To understand this, we need to look deeper inside the artery wall. The story often begins long before symptoms appear. In fact, it can begin decades earlier. Inside the inner lining of the artery, tiny cholesterol particles circulating in the bloodstream can slip beneath the surface of the vessel wall. These particles are usually a form of cholesterol called LDL. Once they enter the wall of the artery, they can become trapped in the tissue. At first, this does not seem dangerous, but the body sees these particles as something that does not belong there. As a result, the immune system reacts. White blood cells move into the artery wall in an attempt to remove the cholesterol. These immune cells absorb the lipid particles and slowly become filled with fat. When this happens, they transform into what scientists call foam cells. Under a microscope, foam cells look swollen and filled with tiny droplets of fat. Over time, more and more foam cells accumulate inside the artery wall. This growing cluster of lipid-filled immune cells forms the earliest stage of atherosclerosis, the disease process that eventually leads to plaque formation. At this stage, blood flow through the artery may still appear completely normal. The vessel is not necessarily narrowed yet. In fact, arteries have an interesting ability to adapt as plaque begins to develop. Instead of allowing the plaque to immediately narrow the vessel, the artery can expand outward slightly. This process is known as positive remodeling. The artery wall enlarges just enough to preserve the space where blood flows. Because of this adaptation, plaque can grow quietly for years without causing obvious obstruction. This is one reason heart disease is often called a silent process. Over time, the plaque inside the artery wall becomes more complex. The foam cells begin to break down, releasing lipids and cellular debris. Smooth muscle cells migrate into the area and produce fibrous tissue that forms a protective covering over the growing plaque. This covering is known as the fibrous cap. The fibrous cap acts like a barrier, separating the contents of the plaque from the blood flowing through the artery. As long as this cap remains thick and stable, the plaque may remain relatively harmless for a long time. Many people live for years with plaques that never cause serious problems. However, not all plaques remain stable. Some plaques develop a large lipid core and a thin fibrous cap. In these plaques, inflammation inside the artery wall continues to increase. Immune cells release enzymes that gradually weaken the fibrous cap. As the cap becomes thinner and more fragile, the plaque becomes vulnerable. Doctors often refer to these as vulnerable plaques. These plaques may not produce the largest blockage in the artery, but they are far more likely to rupture. A plaque rupture can happen suddenly and without warning. When the thin, fibrous cap tears open, the inside of the plaque is exposed directly to the bloodstream. To the body, this looks like an injury inside the artery, and whenever the body senses injury inside a blood vessel, it immediately activates the clotting system to repair the damage. Platelets in the blood rush to the site of the rupture. These platelets stick to the exposed plaque and begin forming a clot. Within minutes, the clot can grow rapidly. Unlike the plaque itself, which formed slowly over many years, the clot forms extremely quickly, and this clot can suddenly block the artery. When blood flow to the heart muscle stops, the affected part of the heart begins to lose oxygen. Without oxygen, heart cells begin to die. This is the moment when a heart attack begins. This mechanism also explains something that surprises many people. Heart attacks do not only happen to people with obviously unhealthy lifestyles. Even individuals who appear physically fit can experience heart attacks. Exercise, a balanced diet, and healthy metabolic markers certainly reduce risk. But these factors do not always remove plaques that have already developed in the arteries over many years. Some plaques may have been forming quietly long before a person improved their lifestyle. If one of these plaques becomes unstable and ruptures, the same clotting process can occur. Another surprising aspect of plaque formation is that the most dangerous plaques are not always the largest ones. In fact, plaques that create only moderate narrowing in the artery are often the ones that rupture. Large plaques with thick fibrous caps may remain stable for long periods of time, but smaller plaques with thin caps and high levels of inflammation are more fragile. When these plaques rupture, they can trigger the sudden clot that causes a heart attack. Because plaque can develop silently for decades, many people have no idea it is happening inside their arteries. There may be no pain, no warning signs, and no noticeable symptoms. The artery continues to deliver blood normally until the moment when a rupture occurs. This is why heart attacks can sometimes appear to happen suddenly, even in people who felt healthy just days before. Researchers now focus heavily on understanding what makes a plaque stable or unstable. Inflammation inside the plaque appears to play a major role. High levels of inflammatory activity weaken the fibrous cap and make rupture more likely. Scientists are studying ways to detect these vulnerable plaques earlier and stabilize them before they rupture. Modern imaging techniques can sometimes reveal signs of plaque development before major blockages occur. Doctors can measure calcium deposits in arteries or use advanced scans to evaluate plaque structure. These tools help identify individuals who may have hidden plaque inside their arteries, even when they feel perfectly healthy. Understanding plaque formation has completely changed how scientists think about heart disease. For many years, doctors focused mainly on how narrow an artery had become. Today, researchers know that the stability of the plaque may be even more important than the size of the blockage. A plaque that appears small on a scan may still be dangerous if it is vulnerable to rupture. This new understanding also explains why prevention focuses not only on lowering cholesterol, but also on reducing inflammation and improving overall cardiovascular health. Lifestyle changes such as regular exercise, balanced nutrition, and good metabolic control can help reduce the processes that destabilize plaque. Medications that lower cholesterol and reduce inflammation also play an important role in protecting the artery wall. Heart disease does not usually begin with a dramatic event. It often begins quietly, with microscopic changes inside the artery wall that slowly develop over decades. Tiny cholesterol particles slip beneath the lining of the vessel. Immune cells respond. Plaque begins to grow. And for years, the process may remain invisible, but one day, a vulnerable plaque may rupture. A clot forms in minutes, blood flow stops, and the heart muscle is suddenly deprived of oxygen. This is why heart attacks often appear sudden, even though the underlying process began long before. The real danger may not be the blockage you can see. Sometimes, it is the hidden plaque inside your arteries that you never noticed.